Oops. I was in, has access now and
Encouraging one of the CRISPRs, I think there's water. Gomez. Yeah. One of the renters in that home is on Hawks. What's the city's liability for turning that electricity off?
I don't know if we actually did check.
Oh, it's on,
That's
because they've called multiple times today.
And have they not paid?
They haven't paid, it's not back on.
I checked with. I would call Clark and say, what do you want to do with this? Because he's on oxygen. Because what Paul did was have that, you know, he had him sign something.
Well, they told him to get a doctor's note. So. But I just don't know what the city's liability will be if something happens.
The other $100. See, they paid two payments. Hey, Wes, just let you know, the work session, Justin Reese won't be here till 6:30. But at the general session, we'll have a forum, so.
No, do that. And you can excuse. On a list of those who aren't here, you can excuse them. Everybody's in that little one.
Yeah.
In the waiting room.
Oh, baby shower. She not on me. Yeah, they bring them down. He said it's kind of. She had like a stick or something.
Hi, Gary.
Did a bunch of x-rays and stuff.
You're on mute.
She,
You know, how many years has it been since COVID hit and since we,
like, didn't.
4.
all this time, mute is my nemesis.
Well, it keeps you from saying things that you don't want to.
There you go. Well, that's where you have to both stop the video and mute.
On this subdivision, I just have a bunch of Utah League materials. I'm
Yes,
just gonna walk through some of that.
that's the
And
best.
maybe on that, just jump in at any point and clarify or add.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, sounds good. One thing the development community has kind of done and trying to simplify things is to make them more complicated. Which is always the case, right?
Love complicated.
I swear they said they were coming.
Just to meet you.
Been waiting for Ray and.
Ray, Aaron, and. Ray, Aaron, and then Justin will come at 6:30. And Jenny is on, so.
We're just waiting for a couple more people.
What, So, Morgan's gonna hit the 5,000 mark sometime over the next couple years. I don't know when. How do you know when that happens? Is it by like,
Census?
okay. Is it a decade census? I mean, or is it,
Decade census is the official time of counting. And I don't think the state continually tries to update its population estimates because of its things like, but representation in Congress and all those other critical things are tied to that 10-year census. So really, literally, there has to be either a challenge to the size of the city by somebody where we actually do some type of analysis as to what our population is today. And then we change based on that, or we wait till the 10-year census comes up, which is in 2030, right?
okay.
So. I mean, somebody could challenge it, I guess. We came up with that same issue when Layton went from being a third-class city to a second-class city.
Oh,
There were changes that had to be made, and we actually left it until the 10-year census to actually make the change. But
it's interesting.
and in the meantime, we changed the law to not require that you shift to a commission form of government at second-class city, which was kind of a wild change. And then there was also a requirement that you create a civil service board for your public safety, which just about threw our police department into a tizzy. And so they didn't want to be another Salt Lake.
I want to be on this list too.
How are you doing, David?
Harry, not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. Good.
We just got over COVID, though, of all things.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, can you believe that? I don't know where that comes from.
Came around again, huh?
Yeah, second time. Did it in, of course, 2022 when, we were all having trouble. But the good news was the symptoms weren't as significant. I've always stayed up on my vaccinations, and it, I think, made a difference.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Did you ever have it?
I did. I was
Yeah.
in the very first round
Okay.
initially, and it was pretty bad for a couple of days.
Yeah, I went downhill fast for the first 2 days, and Gary got me some medicine. Had it not been for that, I think I would have been in the hospital.
I think my wife still hasn't got her taste back and smell.
Is that right?
Uh, and Ty tells me he hasn't either.
Yeah, I asked him that. I lost mine for about a year.
Oh, and it came back.
Then it came back. So there may be hope.
There is hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was my biggest concern with this go around. I didn't want to lose it again.
Yeah. 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 Plus,
I guess it's something we just live with from here on out.
I think a lot like the flu. You just get
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
get your vaccinations, which we have, and
We just update it on a regular basis from now on.
just like a flu shot. So
Yep. Yeah. Maybe they'll make it part of it.
yeah. Yeah. We just got back. Leilani's mom passed away up in
Oh
Kent.
dear. I know you'd been spending a lot of time up there.
We were up in Lethbridge, and then after she passed away, we just took a little trip up to Golden, BC. I don't know if you've ever been up to Banff
No.
and
Wow.
Jasper and Lake Louise,
Uh-huh.
those areas. But Golden's a little bit north of that, and
Uh-huh.
it's so far north that the sun doesn't set really till about 11 o'clock at night.
Is that right? I've
And
never experienced that. That'd be bizarre.
it's just gorgeous, but it comes up
Yeah.
at like 7 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
So it's, it's up over the mountains.
The Northern Lights, any of that?
Didn't see any of that, but they do see it when it happens. They
Yeah,
have a really, really good people
display.
look at it, but
Oh, that's fun.
it's beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. So
How much time were you away?
we were away 2 weeks,
Wow.
but Leilani was away for 2.5 months.
Oh, well, I know she's been taking care of her mother there, so that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, darn it. Sorry to hear that. I'm sure, life goes on for sure, but
It does.
in some cases it's it's for the better.
Yeah, it is. It was in this case. It was cancer. That's always a painful disease.
And Ray says he's on his way, so we can start here.
Jason, how are you?
Hey, I'm just here hanging out. I'm thankful you guys mentioned COVID. I've got a good friend. He was one of those stories on KSL. He got it the worst of the worst, and
Wow.
he's down in Phoenix waiting to get a new pair of lungs. So
Oh,
Oh my
holy
goodness.
smokes.
he's a remarkable example of somebody that got the shorthand, and
Yeah.
I can't believe he's alive still, but he is. And
Holy smokes. Is he from Utah, Jay?
yeah, he owns a furniture store down in Salt Lake, and
Uh-huh.
he lives up in the Harvard Yale areas.
Oh.
Neighbors with Kyle Whittingham, very successful
Hmm.
in the bishopric, and
Hmm.
cute, wonderful family, and just strong guy, and just
Boy,
for
Wow.
whatever reason, it literally just destroyed him, and it's been humbling as can be to watch.
holy smokes.
That is
Hope it,
Um, is it a lung transplant that he's waiting for? Is that?
Yeah,
I didn't even know they did that. That's amazing.
you know,
Oh my goodness. So is he on a kind of ventilation type unit until that happens?
he wears oxygen, and he doesn't have any energy, and
Oh,
it's pretty miserable.
what was his health like before he got it?
I think it was good. I don't, he may have been diabetic. I'm not sure, but and I think that was kind of a pre-existing condition of at risk or something like that. But
Well, Matt, that's horrible.
so
So,
we're thankful for our health, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
grateful for that.
so Gary, loss of appetite would be minor, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah, I'm not going to complain anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have an 89-year-old mother that got it the same time we did,
Ah.
and it took most of the capacity in her lungs. So
Uh-huh.
Gary's her doctor, which is
Yeah.
he's been outstanding.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But she's on oxygen now. She wasn't before,
Uh-huh.
but she's still able to breathe. She's still.
We're going to
Wow.
get started, gentlemen and ladies. You know how this generally goes when I'm running this thing, so we want to
it goes-
welcome everybody to the
It goes fast, right?
FAST Planning Commission meeting. And I would like to welcome anybody that's out there on Zoom. We're going to turn the time over to Jake to discuss the agenda item, and that is the final subdivision, Mountain Horizon subdivision. And also, should we do one of them at a time? Or do?
However you want.
Okay, we'll just, and then also the sensitive lands on partial 04-319-002 HA development. Take it away, Jake.
Thank you, Chair. before we jump into the actual items, I just want to mention that the reason we canceled the public hearing is that the layout of the application was looking good on the MRO. And then when I was doing my report, they weren't meeting all the requirements, some of the details of like, so many units of this and that, because there's some math involved on the MRO. And I told the applicant, I said, you can come before the planning commission, but the report is gonna recommend denial. And then that sets you back. And he said, no, I'm pulling the plug. We'll reapply. So the layout was looking good, but there were some details that weren't quite in there. So we gave them the option of it. That was on item 1 and 2, the public hearing that was canceled. I just want to give you background on that. Okay, so item number 3 is final subdivision on the Mountain Horizon. We're just looking at phase 1 tonight, and that's what's up for approval. In my report, so this is what it includes right here. See that on the screen? Close that up.
Forgive me for my ignorance. Is this down Mountain Island Road? Is that,
No, this is the,
huh? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
yeah, I'll show you where it's at in the city.
Yeah, I know where it's at now.
Okay, yeah, in there, that's that spot that we rezoomed before. So that's where it lies. And a correction on the report, I said 5 townhomes, it's 2 blocks of 5 townhomes, so a total of 10 townhomes in phase 1. 7 single family and then 2 townhomes total. So a single building with 2 townhomes. And a townhome is or a twin home is basically 2 townhomes together or a duplex. For my definitions, a twin home is individual ownership next to each other, and a duplex is on a single lot.
So we're gonna have 10 total.
No,
Is that what you said?
total units? No, we're looking at 19 units.
Oh, just in that, it says
10
twin homes and 5 townhomes.
Yep. So 12 there, and then plus the 7 single family. There is some usable open space. Those will be approved by staff as construction docks. There is, the stormwater pond is included, some common area landscaping, and then the right of way. The city code still requires that the development agreement be approved by city council. So this will be our second subdivision operating under the state code, which is our last item tonight, where the planning commission makes the final recommendation on the subdivision, the final approval. In the past, the planning commission made a recommendation, but now you make the final decision.
So it doesn't
Well,
get passed off to the.
Correct. Yeah. So a little
Hey,
bit different there.
Hey, Jake, on that, the plat map shows the city council is giving the approval. Does that need to be changed?
Yeah, the city council still signs the plat map.
Okay,
Accepting the dedication of streets and, so that the city's signature still needs to be on it, but there's no review process at the council level.
okay. So the planning commission makes a decision on behalf of the city, but it's still a city decision.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. And so the development agreement will still go to city council. And the big item in the development agreement when that comes to you, which they'll need to do before they have approval to start construction, is when do the open space amenities need to be installed as part of the process.
Okay.
And I did have some conversation with the applicant. I think it was, he was asking for, I want to say either after 19 units or 25 or something like that. Not the end, but not the beginning, somewhere in the middle to 2/3 is what that. So anyway, that'll be another discussion at the council, but I just wanted the planning commission to know that development agreement will still be at the city council.
So in other words, if they get halfway through and the first proposal on this open spaces, it doesn't kind of match up and they can make an adjustments? Or is it
Well,
set in stone from the very beginning?
it'll be per the development agreement, like they can build up to so many units. And then if the park and the open space is not installed,
Oh,
then they wouldn't be able to proceed.
I see. Okay.
That's how that typically
So
lays
won't
out.
make any changes, that's all.
Yeah, it doesn't change the design or the layout.
Just to move forward. Okay.
The proposed subdivision is compatible with the general plan. In general, providing alternative housing types. They should be more attainable. It does meet basic engineering. There still will be some engineering comments as part of this process, but that's not your job as planning commission. You don't have to check every item. That's what staff does in engineering. Yeah.
So down at League of Cities and Towns this year, sorry, I sat in on a workshop concerning this. I still wasn't terribly clear about this. So in the future, city council will not, we won't have a final approval process any longer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But the work will be done essentially by engineers and staff, correct? As long as it adheres to the code or the ordinance, that would be determined by the engineers and staff.
Yeah, and that really isn't different than now. What's different is that the planning commission has the final approval and not city council.
All right.
So be careful who you,
They
Has
kept
to
talking
be
about
on here.
a building,
Just
a
kidding.
building authority or something deemed a building authority or something like that.
land use
Land
authority.
use authority.
So
Essentially, it sounded to me like it even took the planning commission out of
it
it.
could be. You actually, you could designate Teresa, you could designate me as the land use authority, or it could be the planning commission, which is what I recommend. That's why you have them.
Because I thought I heard the presenter say that planning commission cannot be part of that authority. I could have missed, maybe I heard that wrong.
They are part of the. Yeah, Gary, do you want to answer that question on land use authority? You're muted.
The final approval is signed by the land use authority. So the planning commission takes it through preliminary and grants their final approval. But Tony, let me look at, I gotta go back and look at 476 and the previous section 176.
Yeah, Gary, the only thing that confuses me and has since I was in that breakout session is I thought I heard him say that the planning commission could not be part of that land use authority. No one on the planning commission can be part of that land use authority. So I guess that's kind of where I'm a little confused.
Or that one member of the planning commission could be, I think.
One member?
Yeah, one member. But
Jason has his hand up.
Okay, I just curious about that.
let me go back and look at those sections. And I'll have an answer for you. I can't remember because they went back and forth on that. That was one of the issues that they went back and forth on, and I think it was decided this last year or so. Let me go and take a look, and I'll get the answer for you.
Jason, you have a question?
Yeah, it's kind of a joking a little bit, but because we've got agenda items 1 and 2, which is behind my house. I've got a lot of neighbors asking me questions. So could we delay the planning commission's authority until after that's passed? So I don't have to deal with my neighbors and me making that decision, or me in part of that decision.
Well, Jason, don't worry, because the planning commission will make a recommendation, which of course can involve you. And then the city council will, anything that is a rezone will remain a legislative item.
Yay.
So,
Thank-
so the buck stops with the city council on a rezone, if that makes you feel any better.
That does make me feel better. Thank you. Usually doesn't matter to me because it's not my neighborhood per se.
Well, welcome to public service, Jason.
I'm not a politician, Tony. I didn't ask to be voted on.
I try not to be either, but
So we talked before about this. Wasn't part of this that staff knows a heck of a lot more of the ins and out and workings of these things than we do. So if I remember, one of the meetings we was in, it was like having the staff, and yeah, if we was gonna use somebody on the planning commission to get this stuff almost to streamline, make sure things are like they should be. Is that part of this? Or am I off on that? Or am I making sense? It was, when the questions came, it kind of just made sense that, I mean, Teresa's involved, you're involved, the city, and then I always felt like I'm behind all the time, but that's just normal. And to help out the developers so that we're not bringing them back and back and back.
Yeah, we're trying to get to that point.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, that
That's what I
we have a streamlined process, applications, checklists, things like that. And I think that for this being the first mixed residential overlay, I think it's gone fairly well. The second item, not quite as well, because if I was doing the second item over again, I actually would have asked them to just go ahead and submit a full application. Because tonight you're just going to say, yes, it's okay, yes or no, it's okay with the sensitive lands, and then proceed with the full application. The developer asked for the planning commission to make a recommendation on the sensitive lands part of it, the slopes, if it was going to fly, essentially, but they didn't submit a full application. And so unfortunately, I have to come back.
So in order for us to weigh in on that, what information data do we have about the sensitive land piece?
We have the slopes, which is the most important part of
So
it.
if it meets those, and the engineer, I get it back to staff, if the engineer, if our engineer says, yeah, that meets the code, I'm not sure why we're talking about it tonight.
Well, you would have to look at it no matter what, because it is sensitive lands.
Right, but do we have the engineer, our engineer's statement on it?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And he has said it's okay. There's no red flags on the slope.
Okay.
So what would have been better is to just have them go ahead and do a full application, even though he requested to.
If the engineer's already approved the slopes, we don't need to approve them again if he's already approved them.
You do, because it's in the sensitive
Yeah,
lands.
I'm with you, okay.
So, question for you, Jake.
Yep.
I thought when that started, that the slope was off. And there was talk about just moving dirt because of the other construction that would change the slope. Am I wrong?
You are correct. This is a slope map right here.
Okay.
Well, we didn't have, there was some discrepancy when we started this.
Okay.
City engineer said it was greater than 30.
Mhm.
Their engineer said it wasn't.
Okay, that's what I remember.
And this is a stamped engineering plan. And city engineer has since said it's okay. I don't know if anything has changed on the site. Um, or if just, however, here's the thing, they actually did detailed surveying. City engineer used one of those tools that it's like a level that tells you
Mhm.
the slope. So surveying is actually a little bit more accurate, and he did
Oh,
agree to that.
Right.
Um, even today in a staff meeting, we found that there's some discrepancies in the sensitive lands overlay that I'm hoping over the next year, code wise, we can just clarify. Uh,
Okay.
so I'll just wrap up here with the subdivision. Um, the application does meet the basic requirements of the ordinance in terms of lot sizes, road width size, stormwater, layout. It's also consistent with what we saw for the rezone. So it is following. The twin home building will sit about right. It's somewhere in here. These two lots are the twin home lots.
And the others are just single dwelling.
Yep, and everything else on this side is single family dwelling.
I'm still excited to see that first section up there, see what that's gonna look like.
Yeah. So that's item 3, which is our first item.
Hey, one question, Jake.
Yes.
It also talks about a phase 1. Is there a phase 2 that goes along with that one?
Yes, phase 2 will be right on this part of the property,
Okay. At a later date.
but a later date.
Okay.
That was not submitted in time, even though the applicant actually just before the meeting sent it over, and so it'll have to be a second phase. And then there's also sensitive lands on that. And the sensitive lands ordinance allows you to build up to 20 units
Mm-hmm.
on a single access. And then after that, you would need either a second access or the property needs to be removed from sensitive lands. And then in this case, that's what he's working on. Essentially, you go in, you add some fill and you raise up the site a little bit. And then once it's, and this follows there's Lomar and then Clomar, all
Right.
Army Corps of Engineer policy. So it's a very regulated engineering process to remove that from the floodplains. And then at
And
that point, he could continue.
so if if it were not removed, and this is the Corps of Engineers has to give the release, and that's in order for him to build the additional units.
That is correct.
Okay, and if they don't, then he can't go forward, he can't move forward.
Unless there's a second access.
Okay,
Looks like someone's in the waiting room.
Who is it?
Okay, so I'll move on to the 4th item, which is our second item. Okay, this is it right here. So the applicant has requested the planning commission's I guess you could say verbal go ahead, because you could make a motion that it looks okay. However, we're not approving the project. And the reason I'm recommending you not approve the project is because we have not received a full plan set, including grading, utilities, landscape, architecture, and building application. And building application doesn't hold it up for you, but we do need all the other items. This is in the RM zone, so there is no rezone. It's essentially a multifamily project or a townhome. They will all be on a single plat, on a single property, so essentially rental townhomes. They cannot be individually sold. Part of the land is on slopes steeper than 15%. And a significant portion is on slopes in the 20 to 30%. A small area is greater than 30%, but the slope map provided by the applicant shows that the building area is less than 30. So my recommendation tonight is that if the slope is acceptable, then the planning commission just go ahead and suggest to the applicant that if he would like, he may proceed with a full application. Obviously, it's up to him to do that. If you have any additional feedback, you can provide that. And if there's any conditions or recommendations.
So I'm gonna ask you to walk me through that motion,
Okay.
how you want it worded.
Yes, and it could be as simple as, we recommend if the applicant is interested to move forward with a full application. That,
Then the later the full application has to be submitted.
yeah. And it comes right back. Yes. And then, and because it's in sensitive lands, it would still continue to city council,
So
right? On the to approve or not approve
We already approved it,
the final plat.
final plat. So we're just looking at the final plat.
Yes,
We approved everything else before, is that
Yes.
correct? So it's just the final plat.
yes.
Okay.
on
Two,
4,
two questions on that, on number,
On number three,
first time we talked.
on number 3,
3.
which
Okay.
which is our first item. Sorry for the,
Sole question on that.
Yeah.
Just for interest sake, on that, look at the map. Which one of those is the stormwater retention basin? I'm not seeing that label.
here, I'll go. It's this one right here.
That one right up there?
Yep.
Okay. And then the access to the east, down at the very bottom of your map there. Does it need a turnaround area at all or not, since that dead end?
That'll have, this is it right here. See right here? Temporary.
But that's on the other people's
Well,
property.
so the temporary part is during phase 1, probably like road base or something
So
like
they
that.
own both those. They haven't done the next phase yet then, is that the situation?
Correct, he does own
That's not the end
phase
of
2.
the property.
Yes.
They still own that property.
Correct.
Okay.
And
right.
then on phase 2 with the fire chief and engineering,
Right.
we realized this same turnaround will actually work. This is the drive aisle to the next set of townhomes. And so the fire engine will be able to just pull right in, pull out and go.
That's why
So it works.
that hammerhead is kind of in parentheses or
Yes.
dotted in light.
So the temporary solution will become a permanent solution in phase 2.
Okay.
And there will be some reinforced asphalt.
Okay.
A little bit, I think a little bit thicker because that's where the fire engines will turn around.
It looked to me like everything's pretty straightforward. Everything's approved. You get new stuff first. Sensitive lands. If he can't get that changed, does this whole thing go away?
Well, it can build up to 20 units and then have to get a second road or get it out.
So he can build these 20 in sensitive land? or
Oh,
just-
yes. Yeah, he can build all phase 1 because we're at 19 units.
Okay, so that can be built until, if he changes the sensitive land, then he can continue to build further. If he
Correct.
can't- If he can't, then he's done.
He could do one more.
More. Okay.
So in his application for FEMA, he's already going through that process with Johnson Associates and their FEMA representative. It's kind of one of those catch-22s, is as he builds, he'll do all those elevation certificates.
Yeah.
As he's building, which will take a portion out of the sensitive lands, so, you know.
And if you,
On each of these in this phase, Teresa?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so those are built and elevations up, the certificate's done, then we get the FEMA elevation certificate, takes them out of the sensitive land, so it's.
and then they wouldn't have to pay flood insurance. If somebody bought a house now, they'd have to
This,
pay flood insurance,
which
which is
is
a
an
bit.
HOA, though, right?
Yes. Yes. So the river is right here. So there's a whole subdivision between the river and the property. So it's just one of those that it's a little bit lower, and I guess when these other subdivisions were built long time ago, they were raised up. Or maybe they're all paying flood insurance now or something, I don't know.
FEMA came through and redid the FEMA maps 5-6 years ago. My guess is when those other homes were built, the FEMA map we currently have didn't exist at that point.
Right.
When we were built, or they were, none of them are worried about FEMA. That at that point, FEMA wasn't a vocabulary word.
In the fifties or sixties.
So was it even possible, what on that road that dead ends, if you keep?
Yeah, where does that go? I'll
It
show
comes
you.
out there by the old Kerrigan Motor. It's set to come through there in our roadmap.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
it
that's
is.
why I was
Yeah.
wondering if it's ever
It does, it is.
gonna have it in and out in there.
Yeah.
If the next property owner ever develops, it will.
I think after 25 years, I would know where.
Yeah, it'll connect right here to 300 East, which actually we had a little bit of a issue talking about
Yeah,
street naming because Industrial Road turns, is 300 East, but then comes down, and I think we did end up with it being at 300 East. It just curves a little bit. Now, if a road ever continued here, that's where we would have a problem.
so there's not a home right there?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I mean, over by, what is 1175? I was just curious.
There's already a paved road between those homes.
Yeah.
Already.
yeah, right here. And this is already, I think, functioning as a stormwater.
Talking the other
I'm
end.
talking east of
He's
the,
talking
Oh,
the
okay.
other end of the development.
yeah, that road.
Yeah, right here.
Oh, okay.
So there's that.
Oh, I see. That's what I was
access.
wondering. So if it meets the specs on sensitive land, then eventually they can tie into that and come out, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, two things, either the road could go through or they do the FEMA process and essentially bring in some fill and raise the property up,
Oh, I
and then
see.
you're out of the floodplain,
Oh,
which is what they're doing.
Oh,
Because he doesn't have that other property, and that other property owner is not talking to a lot of people is what I've been told.
okay.
I don't know. I don't know him or her or them, so. Okay, he's hiding. Okay, back to item 4.
Okay.
Here's the engineering. This is a key piece of information for tonight. This is the engineering slope map. It is stamped by an engineer and it was okayed by the city engineer. Even though we did have some differences from the time before. The rest of the items I put as not applicable. And then I'm gonna just go on. So here's the see right here, this is the engineering report.
Right.
Topographic contour map complete. Slope district map. Slopes greater than 30%, not including development calculations complete based on developer's engineer analysis. So the average slope comes in at 22%. No red flags with geological hazards. Of course, no floodplain issues.
Jay has his hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Hey, just one question. I feel like, did we jump topics? Did we go from down in Morgan to up on the hill?
We did. Yeah, we
Okay.
went from item 3 to item 4.
Okay, thank you.
And item 1 and 2 are canceled. The public hearings were postponed.
Thank you.
Well, Item 16, Jake, later on that engineering report.
Item 16.
Mhm.
So this, again, this is another reason why they would have to come back.
And that seems to be still an unknown. At least earlier you didn't know the answer to, which is fine. And I don't either. It seems like Matt's still not clear on that either. The fill and grade stuff.
Correct.
So can we say if you get that fixed, go ahead or
Well, we still need the other items, the architecture, the landscape and all of
I
that.
mean, there's a couple other things that weren't
Yeah.
done, but that seemed to, Matt still doesn't seem to be comfortable with the fill and grade and slope shift. The way I read 16.
Right, he's not, you're correct. And so they need to do that and really the next step is a full application.
So what's the purpose for coming tonight then if they know that this is done?
They requested that the planning commission look at the slope and I agreed and I apologize. So I what I'm saying is next time we get the situation, we'll just,
Mother, may I proceed?
yeah,
Well, we say the slope is fine based on what we have, but
But
it doesn't matter because the rest of the stuff hasn't been done yet. So
Yeah.
come back when you get the full thing done.
yes, and that's what we will request in the future.
all they're asking if we're okay with the slope thing, but, and my thing is, as soon as our engineer's okay with it, then I am. But if our engineer's still in question of it, then I'm not okay with it yet.
Agreed.
Hmm.
We're not engineers, so
No.
I don't want that on my.
As soon as Matt's okay with it, then yeah, I'm okay with it. I trust Matt.
Yeah.
If Matt's still got questions on it, then I'm not quite ready to say, yeah, fly your kite.
And I think that's a great stance. That's a great place to be. One thing I want, one just kind of planning background on this. The street going up, is that 1600 north? It
600 north.
Yeah, 600. What did I say, 16? 600 is, it's a public right of way,
Right?
but it's privately maintained. And so, and again, the sensitive lands allows 20 units per access. And because it's a public right of way, we deem that, this proposed project, which is, I think, 11 units, is okay.
Oh.
Because it's a public right of way. Had it been a private drive or something like that, that would be different.
How many were in the first phase?
22.
So 22 and 11, that makes 30, so that's a few more than 20.
But it's on each side.
With access the same road in and out.
And because it's a public right of way, then we decided,
It's a golden number then on public right of way.
uh,
I thought it was 20. We got 31.
but it's access on two sides. So
On two sides of that one road, there's only one access in to that facility.
correct, but because it's a public right of way, we're saying essentially 20 here,
20 on one side or 20 on,
20 on the other.
okay.
And also this one is two different parcels.
It was a one-way.
It's actually not.
Yeah, and as Teresa said, when they started the project, it was separate parcels and it still is separate parcels.
Okay,
If it was one project with one parcel, that's different.
I don't want to put 40 homes somewhere, split property first. So half of my brother and I keep the other half, and we both develop separately and we're okay.
I guess if you want to go that way.
I bring it up because I want,
I'm teasing, but that's what.
yeah, I bring it up because I want you to know the background on the road and all of that, and it is,
I'm not opposed to it.
it is a planning. That is how staff ruled it
Okay.
or recommended, but if planning commission, if you decide otherwise, then it's your, then you can do that, that's fine.
And when we were doing the review of these two particular items with staff, because they were questioned by the engineer. And basically it was, okay, well, The engineer says if you will accept their engineer's slope, he's good with it. If you accept that this is a public road and we can do 20 units on each side, he was good with it, but he didn't have the authority to make that decision. Planning commission is. That's why it's in front of you today.
Yeah, and the ordinance doesn't say off of a single ax, off of a, you know, essentially a dead end road. It just says 20 units per access. Gary, do you have any comments on that, on our interpretation of that part?
No, I think that's probably appropriate, the way you've interpreted it.
You went to mute again.
You didn't have any more to say?
The way you're interpreting it is correct. I believe.
Okay.
The correct way.
Yeah, we just, as we debated it, it was because it was a public right of way, even though it's privately maintained. Essentially, it's like any other street, and it was built the city street standards, or it has to be built the city street standards at a full right of way. So that's kind of where we landed. Had it been a private, like a smaller drive or something like that, then that would have been different.
So, well, if it had been a private road, but built to city standards, we're talking about number of cars in and out for safety reasons. So I'm not sure why private versus public makes any difference if the road width is sufficient. Help me understand.
Well, typically it doesn't end that way. If someone wants to build a private drive, then they're doing something smaller and less.
But if they understood the end result, they would make it wide enough to accommodate both pieces.
Yeah, and in that situation, I think we would, you know, look at it and you know, really compare it to the code and see how it lands. But in this case, because built to city standard, and essentially it's like any other city road except for the agreement between the city and the
For maintenance.
landowners that they do the maintenance. Because that did kind of flag, like, well, it's not a typical street in terms of city maintenance. Fire is okay with this because all the units have to be sprinklered.
Mm.
So that you know, that's part of the equation is how does fire look at it, and
I'm understanding. Yeah.
we had that discussion with them.
Like 100 East heading from city up to Wilson Shop. You can have subdivisions off all sides of that, so that you only have 20 in it, but the road itself could have a bunch on. So I'm understanding.
Okay, we could save the last item. Oh, and then we talked about the engineer's report. Okay, so that's it on those two items. And then the third item, I'll just give you background on I'm just going to be presenting some of the Utah League of Cities and Towns material on the subdivision ordinance. Tonight, we're not even looking at a draft ordinance. We're just going over some of the changes in state law that have come about the last 2 years. And then we'll bring back over the next couple months a draft ordinance. Probably not July, maybe August. I want to go through it with Gary and make sure we have a good draft ordinance to bring to you and then you would review it, debate it, and when you think it's good, then you would go ahead and we'd advertise and have a public hearing and then proceed from there. But we 100% to comply with state code have to have the new subdivision ordinance in place before December of this year. And
on the business side of this, what we've been talking about, what we're doing, makes sense for the developer. I'd rather go walk into a meeting knowing that I've got to check off these boxes and I've done all of that before, because everything's getting so expensive with, you know, engineers and stuff like that, that this seems like a lot better way to attack these subdivisions and these projects than the way we've switched from just show up and see, you know.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you. So yeah, this makes sense.
And prior to this, subdivision ordinances across the state were all different. You know, each city had a very unique, different process, and this legislation requires cities to be on a similar page. There is still some flexibility, but not a ton.
They want cities on the same page, sort of, so to speak, but cities aren't the same. I mean, it's almost crazy to compare every city that you have to have this road that, you know, this is the map you have to follow.
And think about the subdivision ordinance more as a process than zoning. We still have zoning, lot sizes, character, landscaping. All those other things can still be unique to Morgan. It's the process of how a landowner wants to, you know, parcel that up and subdivide it into smaller parts. That's what the state is saying. They want the process to be similar. There still is levers and flexibility within the legislation. It's not a single, but it is a lot smaller than it used to be.
And an example is one of my good friends does small little projects. And I've mentioned this before. He tried to do it with Morgan, and he's just like, man alive, you guys are just too tough. And then he goes over to Rich County and meets with them. He goes, I want to do like 5 homes in this piece of property. And like, oh yeah, just send us the plans. Yeah, he takes them in, gives them to him. Yeah, that looks good. Just get started. You know, so there's big spectrum of that's way too lax. And I can see why the state wants everybody kind of on the same page, because a developer, that would get really frustrating. And yeah, I'm with the mayor too. It can get a little bit too crazy sometimes, but on the other end, we need that.
On the other side of that coin, in my experience, a big portion of the holdup is because their engineer didn't read our city code, our ordinances. They went by what they figured it ought to be, and they think they're God and king over our ordinance. So that's, to me, a bigger problem is that the developers, engineers aren't reading our code and following our code. They're just trying to push their ideas on us.
That does happen sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes the engineer for the developer relies on the city's engineer to essentially fix the plans.
Mhm.
Happens quite a bit, you know. There's like software development, like let's just send out Windows 98 right before all the bugs are found, because the public will find it and tell us. However, the city bills the developer for all the time that the engineer spends fixing a redlining, so they pay double. And then 2, this new ordinance does address that, because there is cycles in terms of city has so many days, and then the developer actually has so many days to update it and get it back. And they have to actually fix all the items before they give it back. So what you're talking about is actually built into the new process. But we can talk all about this in the main session.
Learning process. Okay, you got anything else, Jake?
I do not.
All right, so let's adjourn this this part of it, and we'll pick back up in the general session at 7 o'clock.
Here.
Yeah, because as a developer, if I go in somewhere, I'm gonna ask for the world, and if you tell me no, then I'm like, well, crap, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do it. But if no one says no, human nature, you're just gonna do it what's cheapest for you and get it built. And I think what you're talking about, the attitude of, well, once it's up, no one can say anything about kind of
Yeah.
a deal. And so, no, it's something that developers and builders will go, okay, this is what expected out there in Morgan, and it's a lot easier to come knowing that they're gonna hold my feet to the fire until I do it right. And it's not Morgan's code, it's the state code is what you're saying.
Right.
All right. Oh,
If you don't.
My wife, my mom just had it done 2 weeks ago.
yeah, what you think?
She's doing okay.
Yeah.
Did you have yours done?
Yeah, it's just weird. It gets stiff and hurts, but if she finds your IT bands, okay, they get like crazy inflamed sometimes. And I got a friend of mine that's physical therapy.
Yeah.
And he does acupuncture. And he's got this new method. And my leg was just like fire. It hurt so bad. And he did this thing to me. And they twist those needles and hooked electrodes. In one session, I was fixed.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
It was crazy. Going to,
Jordan, how you doing?
Long time.
Hi, brothers. Yeah. Well, you're gonna have.
Busy, good. What's up? Anybody?
Just. Oh, so there's-
Okay.
Oh, yeah. How's it going? Good. You know, 20. No. I figured I'm psychotic. Been trying to talk to my brother-in-law to get out of here. Yeah. They have a disease.
Oh, I wanted to find out. How long did you go not make?
They had a little bug.
I heard that.
Well, it's a sugar well.
No, sure, how you doing?
It's Tony to get back.
Yeah, John.
You know what, we got. Yeah. Roger's retired, he just shows up.
He says he-
Once he goes, you gotta give it to him. It's in his blood.
Man, I believe it is.
It really is, I think it's fine, he's got a good brain. They had a little bug, it was up in like 40 foot, which is like $10 over last year. Still pretty, fairly, not even pretty. Still my dad last year, that's all. Yeah, dad was 13. 2013 was like $120 average. Then everyone's like, they poured on, just triple their farm size and then. Yeah. Yeah, Anthony Jones still got me. My mom is just sister away, she's not. Although I call him new dad, so new dad, she sees he secretly has the desire to get the book. No, he doesn't.
I was surprised.
Did you meet him? Oh, he did work, that's right. Big guy. He's a great guy. Yeah, he's.
He seems like a very old.
at night.
He's been really good.
I'm just not gonna be there.
Well, his wife, his wife went back. But he's a crappy accessory, which has been good. Water ski, snow ski, right? Play ball. No, we're not sure, that's right. All right. That's where they come to keep work here. Not true. I'm well, how about you?
No, I'm here.
So, Mr. Reese, how was your week?
I got a little sun there. Sweet, yeah. It was great. You guys made it. I stuck out to North Carolina, US Open on golf. I've never been to a major golf tournament. I went to the one in Phoenix, so they get drunk and just fall. That one was.
That's what they buy.
Rowdy one. My brother was down.
And you were there on 18. But it
Right,
ended, right?
right above it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite the ending.
Do I need to get?
I better bring. They didn't move my funds to me, so I didn't have to get back.
Yes, 1 second.
I got them the presents.
Very nice.
We don't need to.
And then when you do after the discussion.
Yeah. I know, I might take 3 back with it.
I did, thank you. Wow, he's so generous.
Okay, everyone, we are a couple minutes late. Welcome to the Morgan City Planning Commission on, what day is today? June 18th, 2024. First bit of business is to approve some minutes. We have some minutes from May 21st. Is there any discussion on the minutes of the Planning Commission? Okay, if not, we'll entertain a motion and a second. I have go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Ray to approve the minutes of May 21st. Do I have a second?
You have a second, Mr. Chair?
Okay, Justin is approved, or a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it's unanimous. Motion passed to approve the minutes on May 21st. Okay. So the first 2 items have been done away with for tonight. So we're going to move on to item 3. Item 3 is the Mountain Horizon subdivision application for parcel 00-0056-1256 and 00-004-9278 located at 300 North, 300 East in Morgan, totaling 4.12 acres. All properties are located in the residential overlay zone, and this item was discussed during the work session. Jake, we're going to turn a little time over to you for some further discussions.
Great, thank you.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I forgot to welcome everybody here. Welcome. When you walk up, make sure the light's on and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and do a screen share and then pull up One second here. Okay. So our first item, as mentioned, is the Mountain Horizon subdivision. Tonight, the Planning Commission will be looking at phase one of the project. It is proposed as 2 phases. Phase one includes 7 single-family homes, 2 twin homes, so 1 building with 2 units, and then 2 blocks of 5 townhomes. And that's a correction from the staff report. Also includes some usable open space, some open space with a stormwater pond, common area landscaping, and then the street right away and all the improvements that go into the street. There's 2 parcels involved with this project, as included in your staff report. The application meets the requirements of site layout, building types, unit numbers, setbacks, lot sizes, widths, and usable open space. This project was previously approved for a rezone to the mixed residential overlay. This is the first project of that type in the city. Following legal counsel, tonight, the Planning Commission will be providing final approval of the plat. It still will require a construction document approval by staff, and also building permit approval by staff, and all the requirements that come with the MRO zone with that. The applicant will still need to go to city council for the development agreement, but not the planning commission, if approved. So that is the one time, the additional time the city council will see this project. The additional information required for architecture, open space amenities, all of that will be required at the building permit phase, not at the subdivision. Tonight, the Planning Commission may approve the final plat, may discuss the design with the applicant. And this is an administrative approval. It's something important to understand. Sometimes you wear your legislative hat when it's a rezone or a conditional use. Or this, of course, the city council wears the legislative hat. But in this case, it's administrative decision. And what that typically means is that if it meets the ordinance, then you should be making a recommendation on it. Here's the location of the property. Right off Industrial Road, 300 East. And here's the current zoning. So as the mixed residential overlay and then commercial underneath. And residential. RM15. Here is the proposed phase one. I'm going to switch to the full plat drawing here. This is different. This was emailed over this week from the applicant, like today. So the layout is the same, just the labeling is different. The R for residential. Here's the park, the pocket park on the upper left, and then the stormwater is in the common area here. And these are common areas around, and then a drive in the middle to access the townhome lots. And just for background information, not for approval, this is what the proposed second phase is. And tonight you are not voting on phase two, but the applicant has provided this, and this might help you just kind of get an idea what that looks like. It's all very consistent with the schematic plan that was reviewed at the MRO rezone. So Want to mention it is in the sensitive lands overlay or the sensitive lands district. And so the applicant can build up to 20 units. And then after that, he would either need to have a second road or go through the legal process with the Army Corps and FEMA to get the properties out of the floodplain. But that's not our decision. That's something that the Army Corps would do. And my understanding is the applicant started that process and is working with city engineering and the Army Corps in that process. Any additional questions from the Planning Commission? Applicant is here tonight, so we could hear from them if you'd like. It is not a public hearing, so you don't have to open it up for public opinion, but you can give the applicant a chance to provide any information or answer questions.
Yeah, do you have something that you'd like to ask or bring to our attention?
So, any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Got two questions. So up in that top left corner, you've got a park. Tell me your vision there on that park area.
You'll need to state your
Sorry.
name. and
Ryan
and
Nye.
address.
You have that landscape plan?
I do. Let me just go grab that real quick.
I guess to additional question for context with that question. I mean, obviously it would to serve the people that live right there, but it wouldn't count as a city park, right? It's going to be maintained by the
Right, the HOA.
HOA and everything. Okay. So, I mean, playground, like.
Yeah, have a
like
little,
that.
have a little
Yeah.
playground equipment. It in that drawing, it had a little walkway around the outside of the park, and they're trying to connect everything to go through the whole subdivision, you know, onto the sidewalks and that. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
And yeah, if you can bring that up, like, while he's looking for that, the second question I had was just on your timing, you know, if and when it's approved, you know, what does your timing look like to get started on it?
I'd like to be pushing dirt within 30 days. So,
So this is the concept that was provided at the rezone. That's
yeah.
what Ryan was mentioning. Their intent is to follow something similar to this. And construction docs will need to be approved as part of this. So this is kind of a schematic layout. There's probably a little bit more information needed. And I believe that the MRO ordinance states that less than 2 acres, it's automatically a private HOA park. And however, public access is allowed. That way, you know, somebody's walking through the neighborhood with their kids or whatever, they can go and play. They would need to follow the HOA rules. But so public access, privately owned, privately maintained is kind of the goal there. And however, it does benefit the city as a whole. And intentionally, the usable open space in the MRO does not require off-street parking because it's not intended to be a driving park. So there is the parking along the street. However, it's not intended that all of Morgan drive over there to play on the playground.
Commissioners, does anybody have any questions for the applicants? Right? No.
No, as I looked at this earlier, it seemed like everything's in place. I saw no flares, no flaws that I could tell or see. So I'm prepared to make a motion. I move we grant final approval for subdivision, Mountain Horizon subdivision, approximately 300 north, 300 east, Morgan, Utah.
So
One correction, phase 1.
phase one of the Mountain Horizon subdivision. Thank you.
So we have a motion to, is it accept now since we're changed
To approve.
to approve?
Gary, do you have something on that?
Final approval.
Final approval.
Okay, so we have a motion for final approval of 300 North, 300 East and Morgan, Utah for phase one. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a second from Aaron. So, the motion has been, oh, we probably need to vote on this.
You can open up for discussion if you want to vote on.
Oh, okay. So we open it up for discussion. Is there any more discussion on this?
If not, then proceed to vote.
Okay, if not, we can proceed to a vote. Want to make sure Jason's okay. Okay, all in favor?
Jason and Mark, get two of them on there.
What's that? Oh, Mark's on there too. Sorry, Mark.
Who's Rulon?
It's ruling. So we have unanimous decision on this, and so do we need to say I know?
We already did that.
No.
They need to do a roll call? No?
Do we need to do a roll call on that?
Yes.
Probably appropriate, since it's a final, rather not passing on, probably appropriate for roll call.
Okay, so we need to,
Just clarify by name, asking for a yes.
okay, Jason?
Justin's a yes.
Justin, sorry. Ray,
Aye.
Aaron,
Yes.
Mark? He's a thumbs up. Jason's a thumbs up. So it's unanimous.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you.
So motion passed and we get to move on to the next one.
Good luck.
We're excited to see that section there. It's gonna look nice.
Thank you. Get to work. Okay, this is our second item, item number 3 on the agenda.
Number
Excuse-
4.
Thank you. Thank you for the correction. This is number 4 on the agenda. And the applicant is looking at developing a property in the RM 15. Some townhome / rental apartments. And the RM zone allows for that. He's not requesting a rezone. It's located at 600 North, 700 East. Part of the property is steeper than 15%, which can trigger a sensitive slopes district. In this case, it does. And I'll go ahead and go through the project and then come back to staff recommendations after. Here's the location of the property. You'll remember previously we approved 22 townhome apartments here on the other side of the private road on this part of it. Here's the zoning, RM 15. You notice part of the parcel does come down into the single family. I don't know why that's the issue, but typically zoning doesn't always follow clear parcels or items like that. The concepts we've seen show the townhomes on the RM 15. So this is a slope map. I'm going to zoom in. This is a slope map provided by the applicant's engineer. It is a stamped engineering slope map that was necessary per city engineer. And the blue is 20 to 30% slope. And the red is greater than 30. I've got to really zoom in on this because it's, and then there's the green. That's 10 to 20 is the green. and the blue is 20 to 30. So this is the property being proposed for development. The applicant Jordash is here tonight, and he is requesting essentially guidance from the Planning Commission on developing insensitive lands overlay on slopes greater than 20%. Not all of the required drawings have been submitted for a full application. As mentioned in my report, for sensitive lands, we would still need architecture, landscape, grading per the civil letter. And those are some of the main items that are still required for a full project approval. This is not a subdivision of property, single plat with proposed townhomes on it. And is it 10 or 11? 10. He's looking at 10 units on it. Any questions for the applicant? He's here tonight. And the engineering report memo included in says that the topographic contour map is complete. That the slope district map is acceptable based off of the stamped engineering plan provided by the applicant. No significant issues on storm drain, FEMA, geotechnical. However, landscaping plan, fencing is incomplete, would need to be provided. And then also a grading plan. And then in terms of fire, there will need to be a fire review, but it will require sprinklers inside the building.
And I could ask a couple of questions. I mean, I know there's been a lot of work going on, so you guys have had your hands full there. So I think if I can speak for the rest of us here, everything looks like it's proceeding very well. The question that we had as a group, what came down to those items that weren't finished, that were incomplete, as far as continuing to vote on them. So if you go down to like on your page here, Jake, on item like 16, 17, 18, or wherever it was that we're waiting. I think that's where our questions come on. We assume you guys are working on those, talk to the fire marshal, tell us the status of those things that are incomplete there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jordash Wardell, just to remind you. So we were here, I don't know, it's been a year, maybe more than a year ago. And we had these units on this, we had them on our original concept, and then there was some concern over that slope being over 30%, which makes it not buildable. And at the time, we were trying to get the units on the right-hand side as you drive up in there approved. So we just kind of axed that portion of the project off and said, we'll wait on that. And now that we're building it, we just hired Gardner to come up and do an actual topo and do a signed document. And it shows that it's less than 30. So the real reason we're here is to say, hey, we show it's less than 30. We've submitted that. To complete those other items, will you pull up that list so I can look at it? Those other items we've already gone through for the other side of the project, and we've got those items. I just didn't submit them because I wanted to come here and get the approval to kind of submit them. We know that this isn't, I think it goes concept and then you have another meeting for approval anyway. So we just wanted to get the concept before we went to all the work to get it there.
All the stuff except slope comes later.
It was just really the real reason we pulled that off is because there was some concern over it being too steep. And at the time, like I say, we just axed that portion off.
I got a question. What would be the concerns? I mean, if we're right, excuse me, you're right on that borderline of acceptable and not, what would be the concerns of building in the future? I mean, is there any other projects somewhere else that they've started this, it's right on that border and they built and then there's problems. I think that's what.
I think if I understand your question correctly, you're asking what is the risk if we do build and.
Yeah.
And the reason the sensitive lands ordinance exists is because the city doesn't want to approve some project and then in some future setting have it come sliding down off the hill. So that's why they deem over 30% not buildable. And the grading plan for this, as you will see it, is it's down off the hill a little bit. And it is about half the building sits in the 20 to 30% slope. But what we're going to do is use the back side of the retaining wall like we're doing on the other project adjacent. The back side of the retaining wall goes in and that retains that. It's an 8-foot wall and that's part of the downstairs unit. So the risk is having the slope slide down and having a landslide, but that's kind of where the 30% over that is saying, hey, no, we're not going to touch this. But under 30 with retaining and having it done properly, and all of our retaining will be structurally engineered, especially where it's a footing for a building. We don't see any risk with it. It'll be backside of building will be retaining wall that will backfill into the retaining, and then front will just be a footing that's frost depth 40 inches. So it'll be putting the building kind of at the toe of the slope, and it'll be kind of chinked back into the hill, if you will. So we don't see any risk with it.
Okay. I got anything, right?
Just, my stance is I appreciate our engineer, city, and you gentlemen just work with him. If as Matt is looking at this project, if he's approving and looking at what our engineers doing, if they're in the same page, I'm fine with that. Just bring Matt along as you go along with your engineer, Matt.
Yeah, and we
So-
worked with Matt on the prior project the whole way through.
My perception, that's the only statement I have tonight is the other stuff's gonna come. All the rest of the report's gonna come later as you submit more detail.
Yeah.
As far as slope goes, my thought is just work with Matt and have your engineer and Matt on the same page so Matt can approve what's actually being done there.
And those will come back. They'll come back through.
Yeah,
Yes,
lots
you'll,
of
with the
stuff.
full application, you'll have to
Yes.
come back. to the
Everything else
planning
will come
commission.
back through the group.
Yeah,
And because it's sensitive lands, you'll have to go to city council as
Yeah.
well.
be just like that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? So what are we asking the planning commission to do tonight? A head nod?
Yes.
what?
Head nod. They actually don't even have to make a motion. Is that correct, Gary? Because there's no official item, they don't even have to make a motion.
Half a head and one thumb.
You're still on mute. You're still on mute, Gary.
Got it. I think Ray summed it up where he said that if the engineer is satisfied with the review that has taken place by the applicant's engineer, then they can proceed forward with, it sounds like there's an additional portion of the property that they had already applied for application for approval for, but that they, because of this new engineering information they've received from their engineer, they wanted kind of a head nod from the planning commission as to whether or not they could proceed forward with that new area, that has the new engineering study on it that Matt will surely look at and either approve or not approve. So is that sums it up?
Yes.
And I think all of us are saying, as long as the engineers come back and say they're good, we're not engineers, we trust our engineering team, so.
Yeah, and
The head nod, and I think the head nod is yes.
Head nod on the thumb, go ahead.
Yeah.
well, sorry, go ahead.
So may I ask another question?
Yes.
So does this come to the city council eventually for final approval or just
Yeah,
the,
yes.
because of the sensitive lands?
Yes, because
Okay.
it's sensitive lands. So,
as part of your packet, Matt's kind of gone through, and kind of, he has the green light, and Matt called me after I kind of submitted this and he said, hey, you need a landscape plan. And he said, call Dave Rich. I called Dave Rich and he was good with what we had proposed, which he'll get a chance to look again, but, Matt was good with everything if I just complete the packet, but I didn't want to go to all the work, complete the packet if it was something the commission was going to have a problem with. So just looking for that head nod.
You take Matt's list and follow through with those other items.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
In the future, we might just require the full application,
Mhm.
but thank you.
That was kind of my fault.
All right. Thanks you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, since we're not going to have a motion on that, then we will go to item 5. And just turn some time over to Jake and for a discussion on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Planning Commission. Thank you, Chair Woods. So last year, the legislative body of the state updated the requirements for the subdivision ordinance. And that only applied at the time to cities greater than 5,000. However, with this year's update with the new legislation, it does apply to all cities and towns, including those less than a population 5,000. So Morgan City falls in that bucket, and so we're going to be moving forward with updating our subdivision ordinance. Gary, at any time, just chime right in.
Thank you.
Do you have any background before I go through some of this Utah League information?
No, except that for the fact that they were cognizant of smaller cities, they gave us a little longer to actually bring these provisions into compliance and gave us some longer time periods for processing subdivisions, which was a good thing. The league fought back for that. And so this is kind of a 2-year process. Last year, 174, Jake's got it up on the screen there. And this year, HB 476 actually updated that. And so what we're going to go through tonight are just, it looked like just the PowerPoints on each of the items, the main items that the bills contain. Is that right, Jake?
Okay, so this is part of the LUDMA, the State Land Use Code. As part of this, the city designates a land use authority. Maybe Gary can chime in a minute on that. My understanding is that it could be the Planning Commission or someone else, and maybe it applies at different points. But as I've read it, I think the Planning Commission is certainly the best person or body to do that, and essentially you would be approving the subdivisions as the final approval like tonight. I don't know what the only applies to subdivisions. I don't know what they mean by the 1 or 2 family dwellings, townhomes.
So just a couple of maybe points of clarification.
Yes.
The Administrative Land Use Authority, Tony, I've done a really quick review, and that's the reason I was looking to the side is I've got a computer over there that I can look at. And so I apologize if I look like I'm looking out the window, but I'm really looking at a computer. I reviewed really quickly the provisions, and I remember them talking about the Administrative Land Use Authority being somebody separate from a member of the Planning Commission or a member of the council. And I remember them talking about that, but it never, to my knowledge, it never went into, and just looking through the ordinance or the statute, it never passed that way. The Administrative Authority, Land Use Authority can be anybody except the City Council. So it could be the Planning Commission, it could be one Planning Commissioner, the Chair of the Planning Commission, it can be Jake, it can be whoever the city appoints to the administrative land use authority position, and that would be the person that gives final approval, or even after the planning commission's reviewed the subdivision application, gives that final nod, I guess. And then applying to 1 or 2 family dwellings, they took that from you may remember a couple of years ago, they did some adjustments on the design standards for subdivisions, and said that for the most part, cities can't regulate the design standards in a subdivision. And they pulled specific language out of another section of the code. I think it might have been the annexation. It wasn't the annexation section. It was another section, but describing the types of dwellings that they were talking about, the types of subdivisions they were talking about. And what they tried to describe here is, we don't want to include multifamily dwellings in this because we know that they take a lot longer to approve. What we want to include are just only 1 or 2 family dwellings. So that would be a single family or a duplex, or townhomes, individually owned townhomes. The townhomes was a tough issue because sometimes they're part of a PRUD. And so sometimes they are regulated by a development agreement because they have specific standards. So we thought that we were probably protected well enough by our development agreements on townhomes when it came to areas that might be common areas, parks, those types of things. And that proved to be true because what you've just passed tonight under the MRU has townhouses in it. And that is still subject to a development agreement that will go to the council. So that's just kind of some background as to how that all came about and what this means, what 1 and 2 family dwellings means and townhomes mean. It just excludes all commercial or multifamily developments.
Thank you. Where we don't have a lot of apartments or condominiums in terms of stacked, then it doesn't really apply in Morgan. Tony?
Quick question, Jake. Gary, who designates the administrative land use authority?
The city council does, by ordinance.
So that'll be in the subdivision ordinance then. So in the ordinance that we'll bring to you. Okay, it applies to preliminary and final plats. And then the applicant may request a pre-application meeting. We do the DRC meetings. That's where our engineering and all the utilities, and Teresa sets those up, and that is optional. I don't know if it was required before, but so in that case, it's consistent with Morgan. Some cities actually require that. They can no longer require that pre-application meeting. And then the land use authority may hold one public meeting. Go ahead.
The point on that prior issue is it's optional, but it's optional on the part of the applicant. The applicant may request it, and if he requests it, we have to do it. But in Morgan, like you say, that's not an issue. And just going back really quick to the preliminary and final plat piece, and I know we'll get into more details as this thing goes through, but there was a little bit of a controversy in the league because some cities are really heavy on engineering when it comes to preliminary approval. And that's where you put your emphasis. That's where you have Matt involved. That's where you have specific plans on infrastructure. You have very specific plans on densities, that type of thing in preliminary approval. Salt Lake, on the other hand, preliminary approval is almost just a pat saying that looks nice. And then it goes on to final approval, and final approval is where that heavy lifting occurs, where the really heavy, infrastructure, all the other stuff that I just talked about happens. And so when it comes to these time periods that they give you to look at these, to review these cycles, the 4 cycles, maximum of 4 cycles that you're allowed, you can either apply them to the preliminary. For example, you could have 3 cycles in preliminary, and then the final plat would be the final cycle. Or you can have 1 cycle for preliminary and 3 cycles for the final plat. And the idea is that wherever the most intense look at the subdivision occurs is where you ought to have the most ability to be able to use those cycles that you're permitted in the time periods you're required to keep, if that makes sense. And I think Morgan is heavy on the preliminary.
Yes, I would agree.
That's where Matt becomes involved, Jake becomes involved. It's not just a preliminary for jurisdictions like Salt Lake is almost like a conceptual approval.
Thank you. Okay, this next item. So you may have, if we put in the subdivision ordinance, you may have 1 public meeting for the, well, it says, okay, may hold 1 public hearing, and this can be a public meeting or a public hearing. Some land use legal counsel from around the state has recommended not to hold a public hearing because it's more of an administrative process. That of course is up to the subdivision and the city to decide whether that meeting needs to be a public hearing or a public meeting. Gary, that I read that was Todd Godfrey that said he recommends to cities that they not make it a public hearing, but make it just a public meeting.
And I think
your thoughts on that?
I think that's the way it reads in the statute actually, because I remember our saying, no, that just needs to be a meeting. If you want to take input at the meeting, you can take input at the meeting. If you don't need to. But our recommendation would be that you just term it as a public meeting. And which would allow the applicant to present their application and the planning commission to consider it. But you got to remember it's an administrative determination. So you're really just looking at the statute or the ordinance, and you're comparing the ordinance to what he's bringing in. And if it matches, it doesn't matter that there are 50 people out in the audience that want to say, we don't like this, the number of units in this subdivision. The bottom line is that you can listen to that if you want to, but or you can choose, the city can choose to not have that public input. And even at the planning commission level, if we designated a public meeting, which I think that's the way we designate it now, I may be wrong, because I think we changed it, Layton changed it to a public meeting, and the planning commission chair can still decide. For example, there may be a critical issue that comes up at the last minute, and I'm just throwing out water, something that somebody didn't realize regarding a water line or something like that. That may be information that would be useful, but the planning commission chair may say, well, we'll allow comment on this issue, but you don't want to open it up because, quite frankly, you're not allowed to change the ordinance right there on the spot. You just have to, you just have to comply with. Does that make sense, or is that confusing?
Question
Yes.
on this. Is this, we talked about streamlining things before. Is this where the applicants will come to Teresa, and Teresa will follow something like this to get the applicants, if they have questions? Because I'm seeing like 20 business days, 15 business days. So when they come in with questions, they will hit Teresa first, and as the city planner.
Yeah.
And she can say, either give them a list or whatever, and then to get this moving along. Is that what?
Yeah, yes, there'll be an application and a checklist and then our ordinance. And I think all three of those will help guide the,
I'm sure there was
Subdivider.
before, but this seems like it just is trying to make it so she doesn't have somebody come in 20 times asking, a different question the same way.
that's true. That's true.
Okay.
Okay,
And-
this
and-
last item on the slide, Gary, so the planning commission will approve the pre-plat and then the final plat will be staff approval, or you want to explain that part?
Okay, the final plat, by the city council or the planning commission.
Is that not correct?
Well, I'm reading through it and it looks like just says a municipality shall approve the final subdivision application. Let's see. Let's see. So a municipality shall review and approve or deny a final plat application in accordance with the provisions of the section and municipal ordinances, which, number one, may permit concurrent processing of final subdivision plat with preliminary, so you can do both of them together, and may not require planning commission or city council approval. So I guess a final plat, if it was just simply a final approval of everything that had been done at the planning commission level, really could be given just by the person out, the Teresa could say, yes, everything's met, and it can be approved that easily or that simply.
Oh.
So it depends on what we put in our ordinance, but it looks like
You,
that final approval may not be required by both the planning commission or the city council.
you're talking about the bottom one on that slide.
Yes,
Pretty straightforward. It says a final plat cannot be reviewed or approved by city council or planning commission, period, end of conversation. That's what that says.
yeah.
So it's gotta be approved by your land use authority. So the question I have is that, land use authority, one of the staff members, or is it a separate body?
It'd have to be a staff member.
Okay, so if it's a staff member,
Unless,
well, that's interesting, how one staff member can hold a public meeting, public hearing.
no. The public hearing has to occur before that. That's what I say.
Oh, that says,
Yeah, that's what I say. Either we're going to do all of our work in the preliminary plan side of it, where we're gonna actually have the public meeting, or we're gonna do it at the final plat process, where we're gonna have our public meeting. But when the applicant has checked all the boxes that Jake and Matt and everybody have given them, then it says that final plat, final plat review may be approved, may not require planning commission or council approval.
right.
And it looks like the league has interpreted that as cannot be reviewed or approved by council. That's what you're talking about, I guess, Tony. So that would be a staff member that would actually just check off say all the boxes are checked off, move forward. So,
Yeah, it's kind of like the process is heavy up front. And then the final plat is checking off boxes and checklists and everything's in order.
Teresa, do you want to weigh in on this? This is going to affect you heavily. So do you have any comments or anything?
I do. I like to talk in layman terms. They've had for the last year quite a bit of training and seminars, et cetera, regarding this. Is how are we as staff going to do this? And simply how I interpret or what they've said in layman terms is basically as developer will come in with a subdivision. If it meets the subdivision ordinance code, you as planning commission say, good, you're good to go. And then staff goes through the engineering, the elevations, all the details, dot the I, cross the T, et cetera. And the land use authority makes sure that those department heads, engineering, planning, et cetera, do their job, and then they do the final approval. So that's how I took it from APA Utah, and even from the lake. That's how they want to do the process. Instead of sitting there getting it hung up so much in planning commission and city council, when it's your professional staff that really needs to do the details. And that's what I believe the developers really want, is the staff to do the details, and the planning commission looks at the simple plan and says, good, thumbs up, it meets the code. And I think that's what the intent was for the bill. Does that sound about right, Gary?
Yeah, except I really objected to that really heavily with, and Todd, I was just listening to Todd's presentation on the website. And the reason I objected to it was because we don't all do it that way. I mean, to take it to a planning commission with no engineering recommendation and no staff review, or, just here's the subdivision. Do you like it? Do you not like it? That's, it's a preliminary, it's kind of like it amounts to a preliminary review in some jurisdictions. And what I said was, why not have some subdivisions, political subdivisions like us, we have the planner come in and say, yes, it meets the ordinance here. Yes, it meets the ordinance here. Kind of like Jake's list that you see. Complies, 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 complies. Especially up front, where they're looking at whether or not there's a completed application, because this whole process doesn't even start until Matt and Jake and everybody else and Teresa say that we have a completed application. And then these cycles start. And the question is, should the first cycle be more of just a conceptual approval, where the planning commission looks at it and says, this is really good, and then sends it on to staff, and staff then does all the work that you've just seen Jake do on this subdivision that was approved tonight. And then at the very last, a staff member signs off on it and says it's approved. Or should the work be done at the front end, where you require kind of a heavy load, that what Jake's put out tonight, what Matt's put out tonight, and then final approval is given by the planning commission, but the checklist or the final plat is actually checked off and signed off by a staff member. That's kind of the way I looked at it. And when I talked to Todd about it, and what I listened to him say is, you need to decide as a municipality whether or not you're going to do it one way or you're going to do it the other. And both ways are correct. But in the end, the person who does pretty much just sign off on the plat is a staff member who has checked to see that all the boxes have been checked by the applicant. So Teresa, what you're getting is more of a, I guess it's more of a Salt Lake type perspective, and that is that planning commission really just looks at it and says, this is good, we like this is all right. And then the real work begins, and the real work is your planners and your staff, and then in the end staff signs off on it looks like. But I guess my take on it is, we don't want to change the way we're doing it. And I told Todd that, I said, cities like Layton and Morgan and Sandy, and there are a bunch of us who really put a lot of work into it so that the planning commission understands whether or not the ordinance is met or not. Otherwise, I don't know how this planning commission feels, but do you feel comfortable just looking at, say, the original plan that these guys brought in and saying, yeah, we're good with that. Here, staff, take it away. You know? I just didn't feel comfortable with that. What do you guys think?
Gary, I agree with you on the more eyes. I understand the streamlining, you know, guys come in, 4 or 5 times, it's taken 6 or 8 months, but what's the reason that they've had to come in that many times? So, more eyes on it, and this is why we're kind of here, is to help the process. But I also see how this is just my opinion, the developer coming into the office and getting the information from Teresa that they need to bring it to this body. And then we can look it over and say, you know, yeah, everything's been done. Instead of vice versa, I guess, is how I was looking at it. Anybody, right?
And I appreciate your thoughts and feelings, but the bottom line is, we can all feel that way, but if the state legislature passed a law saying you gotta do it a different way, we gotta follow state legislature.
Mhm.
Even though I agree with what you said, if the legislature says, no, you're not doing it that way, we gotta follow them until another legislature changes it. That's where it's at.
It's a sovereign nation.
Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share with you some of the things, conversations that I've had with Matt, because this makes a big change in the engineering portion of this. Matt and I have discussed that accepting a complete application cannot just be done by staff, which it currently is. That he really wants to be involved right off the bat on that first particular portion. Because so many times we get an application and it's missing so many documents that, you know, will we kick it back? Even now, we'll kick it back. Eric, you know, Matt will say, I don't have enough information. We're not gonna accept it, but the timeline which is on here is a big crucial thing. So Matt has talked a lot that he wants to make sure that they know what they need to have, that he is part of the pre-review, that this is considered complete. Now, it might be incorrect, but it's complete. So I really feel that the city, especially planning and engineering, are always involved in the city from the very start. And I really hope that we stay that way, even with this new subdivision process.
Well, and that's what that first review meeting should really be, you know, used for. We're supposed to have a list of all the things that they're supposed to meet. And they're supposed to be able to access that list. And then they're supposed to show us that they met all of those things in order to constitute a complete application. And I really don't know how you do that without Matt and Jake weighing in on it, and staff. You know, Lance and electrical and that type of thing. So, I mean, Ray, you're exactly right, but the law does not prohibit us from doing it the way that we're doing it now. The only crunch that I see is the time period involved. I just don't know if
We can't meet the time frame.
I just don't know where you want to spend more time. Do you want to spend more time before the planning commission and with staff like you're doing tonight? Because you'd have 3 applications or 3 cycles that can go through the planning commission, and then the last one through final. Or do you want to go through one application with planning commission like you're doing with Matt tonight within the first 30 days, and then 2 subsequent reviews by staff only, 3 subsequent reviews by staff only? and then a final signature by staff. It's just up to you how you want to do it, but either way is correct under the law.
I suggest we move on because there's some other parts. Gary, can we answer your question a little bit later? Because once we
Yeah,
go through the time cycle.
That wasn't meant to answer or to, as a question that needs to be answered tonight. None of this needs to be answered tonight.
Okay. Because I think some of these other things will hit on that. This slide, I don't have anything to add on here. Subdivision improvement plans versus preliminary versus final. We've kind of talked about that. So the subdivision improvement plans, the construction documents, they essentially go of course, hand in hand with the final plat. Gary, is there any specific requirements on those drawings? Does one have to come before another on improvement plans?
No, that's really up to the city engineer, so that's a good question, but no, it's each individual city has its own set of engineering standards and specifications, and they just need to meet those. Morgan has its own as well.
So they'll obviously need to meet those before they start construction.
Right.
So we can require improvement plans to be submitted before a subdivision application, construction documents. That's that upfront and heavy requirement, which can, puts more work on the developer and the applicant saying, we want you to do your engineering first before you bring us a project. So we can do that. And then the second bullet item, a municipality may not require subdivision improvement plan to be submitted with both a preliminary subdivision application and a final subdivision. So I guess you have to ask for that one or the other.
Yeah, and once again, it's to my point, they just don't want you weighing a developer down with the heavy part, both at preliminary and then doing it again with staff at final. So they want you to pick one or the other, either preliminary or final, where you're going to intensely ask for improvement plans.
Okay. In terms of the cycle, I'm switching over to this one here. This I sent you guys. I think this was sent out. So the initial review of the application, and it's once we've received a complete application, the clock never starts. They don't submit, if we require a grading plan and they don't submit a grading plan, the clock does not start. The clock starts when all the items have been checked. So I think that's something good for everybody to know. For a city less than 5,000, which is Morgan, there's 30 days after the application is submitted. And that's a complete application. And then the final review is 40 days after application. But so Gary, there's 4 review cycles. That's correct. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how long is our review cycle?
30 days for each of the review cycles, except for the last, which is 40. And if they don't come back with the information that they're supposed to come back with within let's see, municipalities must complete a review application with 20, perform up to 4 cycles. I think they go back up to where the 30-day was, because I think we gave the smaller cities a little more time. Let's see, it was complete subdivision plan review plans within 20 days after the subdivision, if the municipalities, yeah. So the cycles are 40 business days.
Okay.
And for the smaller subdivisions. And 174 is the 2023 act, and I think the one that you're looking at, the 40-day, was changed in this year. Yeah.
This
476.
document was updated.
Yep.
This
So-
year.
So this year they gave little cities like ourselves a little more time. But the rest of the process is the same down below, so, except for that time period, which they changed this year.
And so on the review cycle, developer submits a full application. We have 30 days to review or 40 days to review it and get back to them. And then when red lines start, there's so many days, the city has so many days to look at it and review it. And then the developer has so many days to review and update the plans and get it back to the city.
Right. And I cannot remember whether or not we extended the number of days for the developer. I don't think we did. I think
Okay,
the developer has 20 days to get back with us, and if he doesn't, we start over again with our review cycles.
so this gets back to the point someone asked during the work session, you brought up how sometimes developers are relying on the city's engineers to do the engineering. This kicks it back saying they can't just put off projects forever. If they're gonna do a subdivision, they have, and they're gonna stay in the pipeline, they have to update drawings, address all the red lines, and then come back.
Yes.
So it does raise the bar on both sides.
Yeah.
There is if there's disputes, then there's a panel of experts, one designated by the municipality, one by the land use applicant, and then agreed upon third one. So this is all new, that part. I don't think I've seen that part before. These are some of the Q&A that the league answered. Does it apply to PUDs? Yes. Currently in Morgan, we don't have a PUD ordinance. But it would apply there. There's a question about small towns, what they should do, but that doesn't really apply to Morgan. Gary already answered this question that it applies to single family, twin or duplex or townhomes.
Jake, there's an interesting question on page 4. Can local communities still retain an informal concept plan step? Like Gary says, we're not Salt Lake City. And so, I mean, we still want to be a small town, but do things right, and maybe cut some stuff off. I'm just.
You can allow them
Interesting question.
to bring forward a concept plan and discuss it, but not require it. So that's a change, no required concept plans. Either. Essentially the DRC is kind of that concept plan review, which is optional.
So
And then if they do want to bring it to planning commission, do we have to let them if they want to bring a concept plan? I mean, that's kind of what we did tonight a little, was more of a concept of slope, but do we have to let them?
Yeah.
If they want to bring a concept plan?
We
to
don't
planning
have,
commission?
well, we have to allow them that preliminary meeting, which for many people is kind of a concept plan meeting, it's for us, it's a pre-con is what we call it, I think, but that preliminary meeting that we have to hold within 15 days after they're acquiring it is often is what everybody imagined would be the concept plan phase, but it's only presented to the staff. And so do we have to let them come in with a concept plan prior to say, like they did tonight, is this gonna be all right? The answer is no, we don't have to, but we can. We can allow them, if at their request, they would like a concept, an opportunity to run a concept by the planning commission, they could do it. And that would not count as one of the 4 cycles.
Okay, that's good to know. It's not one of the 4 cycles. And as the question here is, it's 4 cycles during that whole process of pre-plat to final plat.
So question for you and Gary. Gary, if I'm understanding you right at the beginning, when you didn't love this whole thing because we're a small town, let me give you a scenario. Say I go and buy 10 acres from the mayor and I decide, well, I wanna build some stuff on it. And this would absolutely just knock me out. All these processes and that, is there, I guess what I'm saying, is there provisions in this kind of stuff for somebody that's as simple-minded as I am? I mean, I would be coming back to the city 50 times because I've never done it before. Are we eliminating a person to be able to do something like that by this? I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying this is a lot of boxes to check if somebody just wants to start.
It is, and that's kind of the nature of development. We could have 2 processes, like a major and minor subdivision. The state law does allow for that. In Weber County, if it's 9 lots or less, it doesn't go to the planning commission. It goes to staff and engineering for approval. So there is a more simple process if it's a smaller subdivision. That of course does create, 2 different processes.
It was just running through my head of like somebody that
Wants to
going to do this one time and
for their
they're
grandkid.
not a developer and they don't plan on ever doing it again. I would look at this and go, holy cow, I don't even know where to start, but we do have to have process and we have to have steps and regulations. I'm just wondering, in my head, maintaining being a small city, but within the rules, but being able to still, be neighborly about it, I guess. I don't know.
So can I just make a comment real quick? And that is that this thing is meant to streamline the process. But if you can streamline it more than this process does, there's nothing in state law that prevents you from creating a fast track for subdivisions that meet all the requirements, that are less than 10 lots, that are, I'm just saying, you can create a super fast where they come into Teresa, they put the plat on her desk, she checks off a checklist, Matt looks at it, and Jake looks at it, and it's done. You could do it that fast. Or you could do another one where it just comes to the planning commission once for preliminary and final, and you've already got the checklist all completed. Teresa's completed the checklist. That would be perfectly acceptable if you wanted to create those two different processes. It's exactly as Jake just said, what Weber County did.
Okay.
And I like that. I mean, I think that's a great.
Is that something you want us to look at? Is actually a small lot? Go ahead, Teresa.
We already do a small lot subdivision where it doesn't come to planning commission or city council. If there's no dedication, like a road dedication to the city, or an HOA or items that would need more review. We have one, in fact, we're doing right now, that it's a small lot subdivision that you won't see because it meets everything. So they submit it, it goes through engineering. Actually, Jake's already looked at it. We're just finishing up engineering and it's gonna be ready to record and start. So,
Perfect. I just hate to eliminate a person just because they don't have attorneys and the steps. I might be making this way more complicated than it might be, but just, I think it would be a good thing.
It's a valid point. Tony?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so it seems to me in my mind, it's that what happened here tonight with Wardell's coming in here and asking for a concept or a mother may I or a head nod is almost unnecessary. Right? I mean,
Correct.
the planning commission doesn't have an engineering report. They don't have any idea about the slopes or the grade or anything like that. It almost seems like it's unfair for the planning commission to have to sit in here and say, oh, okay, go ahead. I mean, makes more sense to me that they come in here with all of that information already in hand. Does that seem right?
Tony?
Yeah, and that one we could have, I apologize, we could have prevented it at staff.
It's
Just
okay.
told
Just
Dick
was-
to have a full application.
Here's the question I always ask. When I'm talking to my sweet wife. If that wasn't the Wardell brothers. And it was some new guy that moved in here from Texas that wanted to do that same thing. Are we gonna treat them the same way? That, and I'm not criticizing or anything. It's a question I always think about, you know. Are we giving a head nod because they have a track record and we know, or, you know, it's a tough one.
I'd give them the same answer.
Okay,
If it's okay, the engineer, then I'm okay with it.
okay.
That answer doesn't really matter where they're from.
Yeah.
Say if the engineer approves it, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And then the
But-
engineer is governed by the city standards and the code, and they have no authority to do anything different. So.
So Teresa, you're not being recorded right now. For some reason, you don't have a mic.
Tony took that from me.
Oh, Tony, what do you know?
Yeah, he's a stiller. Anyway, I was just saying that, the engineer is governed by the, city standards and the code, and they don't have the authority to deviate from that. So.
Okay, a couple more things from the Q&A here. The
To answer Wes's point though, in the past, sometimes I felt the planning commission had been guilty of that, not staff. Sometimes the planning commission, with their lack of knowledge, just said, oh, I like this, or I don't like this. And they made their decision based on what they like or don't like, rather than actual staff data. I think this is correct. In the past, planning commission has been guilty. I don't think staff's been guilty of that.
Well, that's my point I just made with regard to tonight. You folks don't have that information. I mean, you know, so it seems a little bit unfair to ask you for a head nod, a yay or a nay, because you really
We're
don't
just
know.
Giving it to those guys, not any information that we have,
yeah,
I guess.
I think we want to just stick to full applications. Although we made this on, if someone wants to do just a concept, and he didn't show a concept, he was just looking at slope.
But your first slide there said that final plats don't come to this body.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, just a few more things from this Q&A. The state ordinance does require an a checklist. We already have one. We would do one anyway. Is the administrative land use subject to Public Meetings Act? The answer is yes, if it's more than one person. So let's just say that, for example, if it were Teresa, Matt, and me meeting to make a final decision on a subdivision application, if we were acting as the land use authority, then we would be subject and, you know, have to make our record. If a developer says, I want to know why you denied my final plat, then we would have to show emails or something like that, you know, whatever communication we had on it. We already talked about this point that we can have, and we do have a process for if it, you know, a smaller subdivision or less significant, meaning no public right of way dedication compared to a full application. We already talked about this, the pre-app meeting that Morgan does one, and it is allowed, and it's not part of the 4 cycles. And then anything on the landscape bonds? Do you have anything on that, Gary? And that's the last item in this Q&A.
Yeah, no, they just didn't like landscape bonds for the private property lots, the individual lots. People were taking landscape bonds for those. They felt it was a private obligation between the developer and the land and the new homeowner, and that we ought not to be requiring bonds for those. So we can only require landscape bonds for any public improvements. For example, if we have a public park strip that needs to be landscaped, we can require bonds for that. And then I think there's an exception too for common areas.
Does that apply like to the McDonald's? Like, I mean, park strips are all public if it's part of the right of way.
Yeah, if we require a public right of way to be landscaped, then that would, we could take bonding on that.
Okay, so if it's a commercial project or a multifamily project or manufacturing where we say you have to have so many trees and so much landscaping per ordinance, then there would be a bond held until that's complete
Yeah, and this
and released.
doesn't cover commercial. This is only residential.
Oh, sure, resident. So in this case, Morgan's case, townhomes, if we require landscape, which we do for the MRO.
Mhm.
So I actually think the bonding could.
But I don't even think you can bond for landscaping within the MRO anymore. In other words, you know, common areas and that type of thing. I think this year made it clear that you can't do that. At least that was the intent of it. Whether or not we still do it or not is, well, here's the other really fascinating thing, and that is that we still have the right to enter into development agreements. And I think, hang on just a second. I think that was the one exception. In other words, if you have a development agreement that encompasses, like we have, our entire MRU, that you can actually require that before you actually develop the next 6 units, you can develop your first 6 without landscaping, but before you develop your next 6 units, you have to landscape the first 6 units. And that type of thing, they were okay with. They didn't have a problem with it. If they want to, in the alternative, put up money instead of, you know, to be able to move forward with the next 6 units, you could do all of that by a development agreement still. And so,
City council.
so, you know, and that's city council approval. Is development agreements are still approved by city council. So that's the way that you kind of manipulate around. They're just outright banned against landscape bonds is by allowing density gradually as they put in the landscaping. Does that make sense?
Yes.
that's something we'll have to look at in the ordinance.
Okay, I didn't have anything else to go over tonight. Gary, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just,
Sub-
by the next
subdivision?
meeting, I'm gonna clear up with Todd. This, whether this preliminary and final issue. Because in all his presentations, he's indicated that you either do your work in the preliminary phase or you do work in the final phase. And he's talking about the planning commission doing the work. And yet at the very end, it says that the final approval can't be given by the planning commission or the staff, right? Or the city council, planning commission or city council. And so that doesn't make sense. Tony, you're right. That doesn't make sense because in Salt Lake, I know the planning commission is looking at everything up through final because final is where staff takes, brings everything to the planning commission. So let me do some checking on that. But other than that, we've got until December to put this together and get it passed by the council. And so thank you, Jake, for bringing this up. And thank you, planning commission, for looking at it.
Thank you. Anything else? We just wanted to kind of run some of the big ideas before you, and then that way when you see the ordinance, you're not wondering how we're so crazy.
You got something?
Just for myself in mind, a summary. Summary as a staff is going to be heavily involved. For the city, we need to select someone to be the building authority. That'd be one staff member. What we decide to do, probably the mayor and the staff need to decide who the plan authority is going to be. As far as the council involvement, I see what's going to happen there is just they would be involved with development agreements, if there's one needed, and with sensitive land issues. Planning commission, I got only involved. I said it's going to be sensitive land issues and zoning changes. Zoning changes, I think, will still need to come through planning commission and city council. All the other plan reviews, not only the final of all those things, I think are no longer part of city council or planning commission. That's my analysis of what I've heard and read. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm hearing and reading.
The first half of the subdivision process is the planning commission, and then
The mayor may not be, depending on how you put it together and want to do it. We could still do it that way, but don't have to.
correct.
Or you can have two ways of doing it.
It depends on how you want to do it.
That's what Gary was saying.
Correct. Yeah.
Our decisions.
I still see the planning commission being involved. How do you all feel that way as well?
Jake, you got anything else?
I do not.
Gary?
No, I think I've said enough tonight. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But you pay me by the word, so.
I don't think that we have to do anything. This meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good job. You did it.